98% of American homes with children now have an electronic mobile device.
Roblox boasts roughly 4.7 million daily users in the UK. And what we found was pretty shocking.
Under 16 will soon be banned from the major social media apps, with Meta leading the charge.
Those parental controls can sometimes only go so far.
Hi, my name is Pete, and I used to run my own IT business that was responsible for the cybersecurity for many companies here in the UK. Now, just because you have an iPhone doesn't mean that your kid also has to have an iPhone. And actually, in some cases, Android is a far better option, especially as a first phone. Firstly, in terms of the cost, Android phones are typically cheaper to buy, especially older, used, refurbished devices. And many brands actually provide better trade-in deals when buying newer devices from them. Like, most people will know Samsung and Google for their budget phones, but there are other options which are worth considering. And I'm going to link to a few of these down below this video. Now, I actually settled on the Pixel 9a for my son at £499 when it launched, and I was actually able to trade in just an old phone that I had sat in a drawer that took about £200 off the price, bringing the cost of a brand new Pixel 9a to £299, which is still more than most people will want to spend on a new phone, to be fair. But since it is a new phone, that means you can get a warranty, including accidental damage, loss and theft cover, plus 7 years of software support for it as well. So you know that phone will be good for a very long time. Now, for comparison, the cheapest new iPhone you can buy is £599, and if I trade in a similarly aged older iPhone, it only knocks off around £80. Now, if you do find an iPhone, they definitely don't need the latest and greatest, and actually at the time of making this video, the iPhone 11 and the second generation iPhone SE can still run the latest version of iOS. And I actually bought a used iPhone 11 Pro recently for another video. It cost £264.99, and I was quite surprised to see that it performed pretty much the same as a brand new iPhone 17 Pro, and even the cameras didn't show a huge difference. Now, it's generally a good idea to try and keep up with the latest iOS versions, just so that your devices continue to receive security updates. And so I'm actually going to leave a link down below where you can check the current supported devices list for the latest version of the software, again, down below. But just be aware that if you are buying the oldest device on that list now, then it's likely that when next year rolls around, it will no longer be supported. So if you can go up by maybe 1 or 2 models, you'll likely get an extra year, maybe an extra 2 years before it then goes out of support, if by some miracle your child doesn't smash that phone in that time. Now, also worth mentioning here that if you don't want to give your child a full-on phone, but maybe you still want them to be, contactable and maybe want to see where they are, then both Apple and Samsung have a specific kind of watch for kids mode where you can set up a standalone watch with a data plan, but there's no phone attached to it. So this way you can still, call, you can text them and track them as well. Now, they will need a data plan, which is typically around £5 to £7 per month here in the UK, and we'll actually talk more about data plans in just a moment. Now, with Apple, this works with any Apple Watch, and providing you have an iPhone, when you go through setting up the watch, it will just ask if you want to set this up for yourself or for a child. Whereas with Samsung, this seems to be limited to just the Galaxy Watch 7 or 8 models, both of which cost way more than the Apple Watch SE if you're buying new. And at the time of writing this, the Pixel Watch cannot be used in a specific kids mode. Now, just be aware that because both Apple and Samsung watches will be running off of LTE anytime they're out of range of your home Wi-Fi, they will consume battery faster than normal, but both of these watches should get you a solid 10 hours or so on pure data, which is long enough to get through, a full school day and then a little bit more. And then just to cover off all the bases here, choosing a tablet. Now, a lot of people ask me if the Amazon tablets are good value. Personally, I don't recommend them. Yes, they are very, very cheap, but within a year, I find the performance just drops off a cliff and they just become horrendously slow to use. You are far better off finding something like a used iPad or an entry-level Android tablet from Samsung or OnePlus or Honor, which I can all recommend. Even though they may cost a little more than the Amazon alternatives, we just found that, again, our Amazon tablets just became unusable. So you end up buying cheap and buying twice. Good tablets. So now that you have your devices, this is a really important step that I didn't think about with my kids until it was too late. And that is to first create their own email account. Because, well, as they get older, they're going to want to sign into various apps and games, or maybe their Xbox or their PlayStation. Now with Google, you can create an account for a child under 13 years old and then manage them with the Google Family Link app. Now that will also mean that you will need your own Google account to do so. So if you don't have one already, you will need to go through this step twice, once to create yourself an account and then once for your child. Now this Family Link app is going to be pretty central for a lot of other steps we go through in this video. So I'd highly recommend you do this before you skip ahead. And again, I'm going to link down below, but on your phone or laptop, Google for creating Gmail for child, and then the top link here takes you to a Google help article on how to do this. Click on here and then follow the link to create your Google account, and then follow these steps to choose an email address, set a password, and get yourself started. Now, what I would also recommend here is that once you've done this, add the email account to your own phone. Again, both your account and your child's account. Because if you do this, you'll then have access to their email account, which you sometimes need when signing into games or apps or just other services. Now, they can also have it on their own phone, but just be aware that, again, like everything, there is a risk to them having it on their phone. Email especially isn't policed very well, and even though Google's filters are pretty good, there's still a high probability that your child might, receive some spam or just something inappropriate, click on a fake email and accidentally give their password or just other information away. So unless they're old enough to have been taught how to identify like spam and fake and phishing emails, it's probably best for now just to keep them away from their email. Now again, this is your decision. This is just my own opinion here. So now you have a device, you have an account. Now we can begin to actually setting up that device. Now I am going to be using the Pixel 9a to demonstrate here, but it is a fairly simple process. Simply switch on the phone and then follow the prompts to set up a device for your child, connect it to Wi-Fi, select for My Child, and then here you will have to sign in with your own Google account first and then your child's account. Now, if you and your child have an iPhone, you will need to start from your own Apple device, head into settings, family, tap the plus button in the top right corner, create child accounts, and then just follow the prompts here. And you will also be prompted to set up an iCloud account for your child. And here is where I would recommend using that same Gmail email account that we set up earlier. So once the account is set up, you can switch on their phone and then follow the prompts to set it up for a child. Now, once your phone is actually set up, there is one step which I honestly thought I'd skip when we first decided to give our child his first phone. I was just gonna have it on Wi-Fi only with no SIM card to begin with. But then I realized that it would be nice if he did have a SIM card for a few reasons. Like if he ever left the house with his phone on him, we could still contact each other, we could still track his location. And if he ever needed us in an emergency, then he could do that from his phone. And so I started hunting around and I came across a ridiculously cheap deal with a company called Lebara here in the UK for like £1.60 per month for 5 gig of data and unlimited text, unlimited calls for the first 6 months. And then it's something like £5 per month after. They also block adult content by default, which again is another layer of added security that is nice to have. Now this was a UK only special deal, but what I will do is still link down below where you can go and compare to find the cheapest deal all throughout the year. Now, whilst we are talking about connectivity, you can also get some extra protection and ultra fast speeds for your home with the sponsor for this video, Brillband. Now, Brillband are a national UK internet provider who keep broadband simple and listen to their customers. They actually sent out the Eero 7 router, which they include as standard at no extra cost, and is more than capable of video streaming and online gaming with the fastest speeds and widest coverage thanks to the latest dual band Wi-Fi 7 tech, which is the latest in-home Wi-Fi technology. They also provide Eero Secure for free, which provides additional security features like age-appropriate web filtering from the app. We can block access to different categories of websites, and scheduling features, which allow you to actually switch the internet off for an individual device or for everyone in the household. You can also set up profiles, so if your kid has multiple devices, you can group them together and see how much data they've been using across all of these devices. And all of this, as my producer Matt can confirm, it's really easy to set up and just works without tinkering. So Brillband offer rapid speeds of up to 900 megabits per second up and down. And just to keep it simple, that's it. There's one package, one speed, one price, and £0 setup fee. So check out brillband.com to learn more. link will be down below. Now, speaking of parental controls, let's get into the detail here as we try our best to secure your child's phone or their tablet. Now, Android first and then Apple. Again, like, feel free to skip using these chapters in the video down below this video. Now, for Android, pretty much everything we want to do is inside of the Family Link app. But Apple users, before you do click away, the great thing about your child using an Android phone is that you can still have full control over their phone, even from an iPhone, since you can actually download the Family Link app on both Apple and Android phones. So on your own phone, if you haven't already, download and install the Family Link app from the App Store or the Google Play Store. And then firstly, if you tap on the top left corner and then go to Manage Family, here is where you can actually invite other adults to be able to manage settings and approve app downloads from here. So tap here on Send Invitation, and here you just enter the email address for your other half and then get them to open up their email and accept the invitation. Now, back in the Family app, also tap on the top left. Here is where you can see a list of all of your children's names. Now, I actually have them named twice in here because, as I said earlier on in this video, I made a mistake where I first set my kids up using my own email address. Then I realized recently and then set them up with their own email address. But here you can tap on their name, and then now you will be able to see the devices that they're signed into. So in this case, it's a Pixel 9a and also a Samsung tablet. If you tap into each device, here you'll be able to set some device-specific restrictions, which we'll walk through one by one. Under lock screen settings, say you set an hour of screen time per day. Once that runs out, here is where you can switch between allowing emergency calls only or allowing full use of any apps which are set to unlimited use. Under app permissions, this is where you can enable or disable specific apps from having access to certain parts of their phone. For example, under camera, if you wanted to prevent your child taking photos inside the messaging app, you could then disable it from here. Just be aware that this stops access to the camera, but might not stop access to the Photos app. So there might still be a way to work around some of these restrictions. Now, there isn't anything specific that I would recommend in here, but if you aren't comfortable with certain apps having access to some of the phone's features, like the camera or location, then you can restrict that in here. Down to location sharing. Here you can switch it on or off, and generally speaking, you'll want to switch on both of the options in here. And next we have a few toggle switches, which are disabled by default, but can be enabled if you wish. Now, I wouldn't recommend enabling any of these. The first lets them add and remove extra users on their phone. The second lets them install untrusted apps, which may be that they've been sent by someone else or downloaded via a browser. Generally speaking, all apps should be downloaded via the Google Play Store. Developer options then lets them access a lot of the under the hood settings, which if you get things wrong, can kind of break things on your phone. Date and time settings, there's no real reason to need to change any of those. And default apps, this will stop them trying to open up, say, a photo or a message or an email in a different app other than what comes with the phone. Now, once you've been through these options, go back and you have two more: time limits and schedules. So under time limits, here is where you can restrict the amount of time they spend on their device as a whole, or restrict specific apps. To enable a daily limit, check the box here, then tap on the weekly schedule underneath, and here you can decide how many minutes or how many hours you want to give them each day. And if you want them to have more time on the weekends or other days of the week, you can tap edit each day to change just those days. Next, tap on app limits, and here is something that is worth spending a little bit of time on, and that is scrolling through this list and deciding which apps you want to either limit or just outright block. For example, there is no reason why my 10-year-old needs Google Gemini, which is like an AI chatbot, so we can disable that one by unchecking the allowed switch. So go through the list. I'm going to just show you what I've blocked and just explain why. So there are quite a few system things that are just junk, beta feedback, avatar stickers, Bixby Vision are all just junk that my kid doesn't need or doesn't want. I actually decided to block the camera completely on my child's phone for now. And again, some more system tools here: Google Files, Google Mail, Google Calendar, Drive, Gemini, Meet, Google TV. All of these are just things that a 10-year-old just doesn't need. Same again with Microsoft OneDrive and also a few other system apps. Same again with the Samsung version of these apps if you have a Samsung phone: Files, Gallery, Password Manager, Secure Folder. Secure Folder is actually a hidden folder that you can hide stuff in, which also then means that they can't hide stuff if you disable that, so it's worth doing that. Again, there's some more system level stuff here. And then right down the bottom here, YouTube and YouTube Music Are blocks, again, personal choice here. We've actually decided to ban YouTube for our kids because there is just fairly little control on what they can see, which we'll get onto a little bit later in this video. And still in the Family Link app, tap on controls at the bottom, and here is where we can actually start setting some other restrictions. So under Google Play, first option here is require approval for. So here is where all the horror stories of like, my kid spent my entire life savings on Roblox can be prevented. So set this to all content, and now your child cannot install anything or buy anything, even in-app purchases, without you approving it. Now again, this is your decision, but my kid is just no way near being financially responsible yet, so this will be staying on for a very long time. But you can set it to paid content only, in-app purchases only, or never if you don't want to go as restrictive as I have. Now here is where you can also set the age limits for any content they're browsing, so they won't be able to even see any inappropriate apps or films before they even downloaded them. Now under YouTube, here is where you can set restrictions on YouTube Kids, select their age, and I'm going to talk about this more in the YouTube section, but just be careful with YouTube, I would say. Under Google Chrome and web, here is where you can set restrictions on the types of websites they can browse. Now I definitely wouldn't allow all sites. Somewhere between blocking explicit sites and only allowing approved sites is where I would go. Now, if you only allow approved sites, be aware that this can be a little problematic, especially if you are traveling on holiday and you're trying to join a public Wi-Fi that then needs them to sign into a web page. And then that web page is blocked, but then you're not on Wi-Fi, so you can't change the setting easily. So you have to do it all manually from their phone directly, or the tablet itself. It just gets a little bit tricky. But if you just want them to be able to access a few specific websites, maybe in this country it's Busy Things or Timetable Rockstars, then you can allow only approved sites, and then you can tap below under approved sites and add in the web addresses for all that you want to allow. Now likewise, you can also tap on block sites and manually add website URLs in here if you know of specific websites that you wish to block. And then under advanced settings, I would disable the permissions for sites option, as this allows websites to request access to things like the camera or GPS location and the microphone. Back a couple now to Google search. Now, if you do allow them to access all websites, excluding adult content, then you can enable further controls in Google search, which from what I've seen seems to be the default go-to for a lot of kids. You open up the web browser, type in what you want to see in Google search. So this is well worth doing. Now I would choose filter here to filter out any content before they see it. And under personalization, I'd disable this. And then under web and app activity, I'd actually have this enabled, as if you wish to. This will let you view their entire web history, also their YouTube browsing history, if you let them onto YouTube. So if you ever do run into questions on what they've been looking at, you can go through their history and see that. Into contacts, calls, and text now, and then contacts, calls, and text again. Tap on Get Started. Here, you'll be able to limit calls and texts to only contacts that you add for them. Now, this is a really important step here, because if you don't set this up, then strangers can both call and text your child, and we've all received those random spam messages from time to time. And unless you are manually checking, you'll be none the wiser, unless of course they tell you. Under sensitive content warnings, make sure this is enabled. Now this will vary depending on the device your child is using, but the Pixel will scan photos before showing them on screen. And if it determines that the image is unsafe, it will blur the image and show a warning. Now likewise, if any unsafe images are being sent from the device, it will show a warning on the screen. However, just be aware that these warnings do not show on your parental device. It just shows up on that device. Block or limit apps. Now this is the same as what we talked about earlier, but this applies to any device that your child owns that's logged in with the same email account. So generally it's better to make the changes here instead of an individual device, but it's just worth knowing that this exists. Google Wallet also allows you to set up Google Pay if your child has maybe a debit card that supports it. Now mine does not, so unfortunately I can't show this to you, but if you do follow the instructions, it will walk you through this step by step. Under Google Assistant, this will take you through a little setup guide if you wish them to have access to other smart speakers and other smart devices around the home. Now, if you don't have them or don't want them to be able to do this, just skip this step. Under Google Photos, I would disable photo sharing to stop them sharing photo albums with friends or family. With location settings, enable location, and then you can see which devices this will apply to. And then lastly, in this page, signed in devices, which will just show you which devices they are signed into. Now, this is useful if you think someone else has their password and has signed into their account. And then the last tab here in the Family Link app is location. location. Here you can see the current location of your child's devices, and then tapping on family places will also let you create recognized locations such as home or school, maybe you've got grandparents, and this will allow you to receive notifications when your child arrives or leaves from those locations. Now, that was a bit of a monster, sorry about that, but that is a lot of the hard work now complete. Now, I'm gonna do the same for Apple devices now, so my advice would be to skip to this timestamp to continue watching if you don't own any Apple devices. So for Apple devices, you'll need to manage these devices from your own Apple device. It can be an iPad, iPhone, even a Mac as well. And for this example, I'm gonna be using my iPhone to demonstrate. Head into settings, tap on family, and if you haven't already, tap on the plus button in the top right corner to create the child's first accounts. And then once this is done, tap on the child's name. And again, we're gonna start from top to bottom here. Now, firstly, you can tap here to change the password for their Apple accounts. At the bottom, you can tap the age range for apps, tap setup, and here, if you follow the guide, you can tap through and confirm the age appropriate settings. Now, one thing I've done here is to set it to ask first, as there are some apps, I can't remember which apps they are, Disney, Netflix, that just outright wouldn't load for me regardless of what I did. So this setting prevents your child's iPhone immediately saying no, like you're too young, and blocking the app completely before you even get a chance to sign in. Back a couple of steps now, and under Ask to Buy, here is where you can check the box to prevent your kids from spending any money. A very, very important setting to check here. This is the one a lot of people miss, and then, you know, my kids spent $1,000 or £1,000 on Roblox or V-Bucks or whatever it's called. Back again and into screen time now, and this is the big one with a lot of settings here. So we're gonna run through them one at a time. Now the top here will show you how much time your child has spent. So if this is a new phone or tablet, it will of course be blank for now. Underneath that is where we can configure all of the settings. So tapping on downtime, if you enable the scheduled toggle, you can configure which times you want to automatically lock their phone or their tablets. And you can set every day to be the same or set different times for different days. Otherwise, you can just manually turn it on and off from here. And with that schedule, you could set this to be bedtime or maybe just before bedtime to give them some time to unwind without a screen. The setting at the bottom here is a little bit confusing, as whether it's enabled or disabled, the device still gets locked. The only difference is that with this enabled, they get a 5-minute reminder before it does lock. Under app limits, here is where you can set time limits on either the category of apps, such as social media or entertainment, and you can do this by just tapping the circle to the left of it. Or if you want to set for specific apps, tap on the category name to expand it, and then you can choose the specific apps you want to restrict. Once you've done this, tapping on next will then let you set a specific time limit for that app or group of apps or the whole category. And if you want them to be totally locked out of that app when the time limit expires, then check the block at end of time limit option here. Always allowed is where you can set which people and apps are always available, even during downtime. Under contacts, you can allow everyone or just specific contacts, and you can then add any trusted contacts here as well. Under apps, I have the phone app in here because you'd always want them to be able to use the phone in an emergency. You might also want them to be able to use maps for navigation, but you can decide which apps and just hit the green plus button next to them. The screen distance feature helps warn people when the front-facing true depth camera detects people like holding their phone too close to their face, and is supported from any iPhone from the iPhone X or higher, as well as most recent iPads. So simply toggle it on to enable this feature. Communication limits is next. Allowed communication during screen time can be set to everyone, contacts and groups with at least one contact, or contacts only. Now, I would set this to either contacts or contacts and groups, as this will allow your child to be in, say, a group iMessage, providing there is, a trusted contact as part of that group. Now, this is the same option again for during downtime. And then enabling the manage contacts checkbox means that you have full control over, who those contacts are, and here you can add them to the list. And if you want to, allow them to edit those contacts. Under communication safety, here is where you can try to prevent your child from sending or receiving inappropriate content. And this is all done on device. Nothing is actually sent to Apple's cloud servers. And I would always make sure that this option is checked on. Content and privacy restrictions are next. Here is where you can restrict specific content and features for your child. Now, you can enable or disable them globally with the switch at the top. And once enabled, you can then begin configuring. So under iTunes and App Store purchases, you can allow or block installing and deleting apps, as well as in-app purchases. Now, since earlier we configured the option to require approval before purchasing, this will stop them from spending any money. Now, under allowed apps and features here, you can enable or disable specific apps. If, for example, your child is so young that they just don't need Mail or Wallet or AirDrop or any other apps, you can block those here. App Store, Media, Web, and Games is where you can allow, block, or set age limits for certain content. One to pay close attention to here is the web content section, which you can set to unrestricted, limit adult websites, or only approved websites. Underneath this, there are the Game Center settings. Now, the main one I would say is to don't allow private messaging, but you can then tweak the rest of these as needed. Head back one step and then into Intelligence and Siri. Now again, these are all down to your preference, but I've generally set all of these to don't allow because just both Siri and Apple Intelligence is pretty poor at the best of times. And then under Privacy, you can configure to share my location, which I have enabled. And under the Allow Changes To, again, you can configure these as you wish. And then lastly, in this section under Manage Screen Time, you can change the screen time password, which is used to then manually override settings on the device if you ever need to. And then under Notifications, you can check this to get a weekly report sent to your phone to see how long they spent on their phone or their tablet. Now, heading back a level now, there are 3 more options to look through. Now, subscriptions will allow you to share any app subscriptions that you have already subscribed to, including things like your iCloud plan, that might include iCloud storage, maybe Apple TV Plus content. Purchases will let you decide whether apps that your child purchases are then shared with others. And then location sharing is where you'll want to ensure you have this enabled. And you may also wish to block changes to stop them from switching it off. Now, before we move on, head back to the family page. And this is similar to what we just saw, but tapping subscriptions, purchase sharing, and location sharing will let you configure a few extra options, which are worth just looking over here. The main one being purchase sharing, because this will let you set a default credit or debit card, which then all apps purchased by anybody in your Apple family will be billed to this one card. So you might want to switch this off completely, but since we have enabled the ask to buy option earlier, and I'm not sure I trust my kids with any subscriptions yet, I'm just leaving that enabled so I can stay in control for now. Just to be sure, we are checking all the boxes in this video. If your child has a PC or an Xbox, then you can also download the Microsoft Family Safety app. Again, works on both Android and iOS, and you can't do a huge amount, but you can do some stuff. Now, there is also a separate Xbox app, which we will talk about more a little later. If you tap on your child's name, then you can see what they've been up to today or the last 7 days. Then as you scroll down, you can see little links to set limits and change some settings. You can tap on Set Time Limits on both the Windows and Xbox sections if you want to limit how much time they can spend on each device. Under Apps and Games, you can see how long they've spent using each individual app or game. And if you want to block them, then you can just tap the block button down here. Same thing again for Xbox with seeing how long they spent playing each game. And then if they have a PC, you can see what they're up to in a web browser and what they're searching for. Just be aware that this only pulls data from Microsoft Edge. If they're using another browser like Google Chrome, then that will only show in the Google Family Link app, and only if they're signed into Google Chrome as their Google account. With all of that said, one thing I am also going to recommend here is that with all of the apps and logins and games and email accounts and all of the things, it can get very difficult to remember all the passwords for everything. And unless you are very deep in either the Apple or the Google ecosystems, it's best to use something else like 1Password to share the logins. Now, I've tried to do this with all of my wife's stuff because she never remembers passwords. So I normally end up resetting her passwords for her and then storing it in the shared area in 1Password so she can then use it to then log in. And the same thing again with all of my kids' stuff. It's basically always better if I set the thing up, set the password so I know that it's secure at least, and then share that with them. Then as they get older, they can move stuff to their own personal vault, which they can do as we have a single family version of 1Password. Now, we have actually worked with 1Password for many years now on the channel here, and I know they were recently running a promotion for 50% off a family subscription. I'm not actually sure if that's still going or not, but I will leave a link down below so you can go check that out. So that is all of the main device level restrictions. So now you can kind of hand your phone to your child and kind of away you go. But before you do, we need to talk about apps, because there are a lot of parents that I know who, even though they have the right restrictions in place, they say yes to downloading an app without realizing how bad some of those apps can be. So this is not not trying to scare anybody. I'm just going to go through a list of the most popular apps and also games, explain the risks, and where possible show you how to add parental controls, or at least reduce the risk of something bad happening. Now, the good news is that if you have configured all the restrictions properly, then when your child tries to install any app, it should prevent them until you then tap on the notification on your phone. Now, this gives you a chance to look at the app, see what the age rating is for, decide whether you want to allow them to download it or not. Now, as soon as you tap yes, then it does automatically download onto their device. Now, the first few apps are social media apps. Now, again, we're all adults here, so we're all free to make our own decisions on what is and isn't appropriate. But just be aware that many social media apps, like the ones I'll mention here, do not allow accounts for kids under 13 years old. And yet, I know so many kids that are on those apps. So I'm not gonna show you how to work around their age limits, but I will go through and explain what each app is for, explain the risks and any parental controls that you have. But ultimately, the best you can do as a parent is, a lot of the time, is just manually checking these things. And yes, that does mean going into their phone, looking through their messages and the social media apps. And obviously, the older they get, the bigger and bigger of a deal that will become over time. Now, first up, let's talk about WhatsApp. Now, a lot of people use WhatsApp because it's one central app that can be used to message people, no matter what device they're using. It works across Apple, Android, and allows you to message either one-on-one. It also allows you to have group messages, and you can also voice and video call via WhatsApp. In fact, a lot of schools have WhatsApp groups set up by the parents, so parents can all, keep in touch with each other throughout the years. And the same can be said about the kids that I know with WhatsApp. Now, you have very limited control over WhatsApp. There are no parental controls, so to speak. You can't stop random people from sending messages, and it's not too uncommon for me to get random messages from strange ladies who you'd probably not want your kid to see. But you can limit some of the privacy features inside of the app, which I'm going to run through now. Now, if you head into settings, privacy, here you can set who can see various things about your WhatsApp account. Things like when you were last online, your profile photo, your status. If your child is on WhatsApp, I would change all of these to my contacts, and then the last seen and online to nobody, and live location to none. Also, enable the silent unknown callers. Disable read receipts, and this stops people from knowing when someone's read their messages. And also be aware here that there is a chat lock feature here, which would then hide chats from you even if you did go looking for them. And to view that, you can pull down from the chat list. Now, under advanced, enable the block unknown account messages. Now, this doesn't block everybody. It just blocks people who are basically sending too many messages from their own WhatsApp account and are generally, spamming people. And that's pretty much the extent of what you can do with WhatsApp. Snapchat offers some safeguards to teenagers, but let's start off with just a very quick explainer of what Snapchat actually is. So Snapchat is a communication app which became popular for having time-limited messages and social updates. So after a set amount of time, any picture, video, or message shared on the platform would then disappear. Now, this wouldn't necessarily stop a recipient from taking a screenshot, but did make users feel more comfortable with sharing things that they wouldn't normally want to be permanently online. Now, today, Snapchat still offers those core features, but also has social content like short-form videos, a map-based view for sharing your experience of a location, and even in-app currency for customization of your avatar. Now, all of this sounds a bit like a parenting nightmare, so let's just see what we can do to make it as safe as possible. Now, first of all, for accounts under the age of 17, Snapchat will disable things like public profiles and tagging of other users not in your friends list. They also opt out of location sharing with friends and limit unmoderated stories and trending videos, although this is an automated process and you can never be 100% sure what your kid sees will be totally appropriate. Now, Snapchat has a family center, which is basically their way of giving you, as a parent, the ability to monitor your kids' friends and contacts. It doesn't let you snoop on their messages, but it will show who they've been messaging. Now, to get started, you and your child will need the Snapchat app installed and an account set up. So once in the app, you will both have to add each other as friends by searching for your name or username and adding them. And then on your phone, from the search bar, look for Family Center and follow the steps to invite your child into the Family Center. And the invitation will arrive as a message inside the app, which they must then accept within 24 hours. Now you're in the Family Center, you can see who your child is friends with, who they've been talking to over the last 7 days in the app, and your child can also open Family Center to see exactly how much detail is being shared with you. You can also then request your child's location, share your own location, and see which of their friends they have shared their location with. You can also set up specific locations to receive notifications as they arrive. Family Center is a relatively new feature of Snapchat, and they do say they are actively adding features as time goes on. But if you choose to let your child use Snapchat, it is worth chatting to them about location sharing, especially when they might want to share their location with friends and when they might not. TikTok is next, and even though it is shockingly easy to trick TikTok into thinking you are older than you say you are, surprisingly, TikTok does actually offer some parental controls with a feature they call family pairing, if you want to properly manage TikTok as a parent. So there are two kind of ways to do this. If your child has somehow downloaded TikTok and maybe lied about their age to get on there, you can still go into Profile at the bottom, then Menu at the top, Settings and Privacy, Content Preferences, Restricted Mode, and the first time you do this, it will ask you to set a PIN code, and this will at least limit the type of content shown as you swipe through your feed. Now, the better way would be to go to the Profile, Menu, Settings and Privacy, Family Pairing, and then set yourself up as the parents and your child as the child. And now you can set things like daily limits, restrict who can message, control if their account is public or private, and manage some of the safety settings, which are all well worth doing here. Now, I just wouldn't let your kid go on here unattended, and definitely not if they've lied about their age to get onto it. There is some pretty shocking stuff that can be seen on TikTok. And then we have YouTube, the world's biggest streaming platform, and there are kind of 2 or maybe even 3 versions here. It's still a little bit confusing. Now, there is YouTube Kids, which is and was a totally separate app with curated kids content. Then you have the full YouTube app. Now on TV at least, YouTube Kids has been moved into the main YouTube app, but there's still the YouTube Kids iPad app. Now, it is a little bit messy and confusing with how it actually works, but there is also a third way, which I'm going to explain in just a moment. But basically, once you have created your child's Gmail account from the earlier step in the video, then you can head over to families.youtube.com on any web browser, mobile, desktop. Here, sign in with your parent Google accounts, and here you can then click into the child that you want to manage. Then go to what they can watch, and here you can either enable or disable YouTube Kids. You can also then enable or disable full YouTube and YouTube Music. So again, let's just take one of those at a time. So under YouTube Kids, click on Content Settings, and here is where you can set a general age bracket for the curated content that YouTube will let them watch. Now, going back a step, you can then check this box if you want to allow them to use YouTube Search. What I would then suggest you could do now is, if you want to limit the content they can watch, is open up YouTube on your kid's phone or tablet or TV, sign in as them, and now you can search for channels that you're happy for them to watch. Maybe something like Mark Rober for edutainment content, and subscribe to those channels. Just a note here, I did notice that you can't subscribe to all channels. There are some limitations in terms of which ones you can. Mr. Beast, which is one of the world's biggest channels, I couldn't subscribe to for some reason. But once that's done, then head back into the families.youtube.com page and then disable search. And this kind of locks them into those channels, although you still don't get any real control over what appears on the home screen. Now, personally, I find that the content that YouTube serves kids is still pretty bad, and like most social media algorithms, it can take you down the weirdest rabbit holes fairly quickly. So what I would do also is disable search. Then go back a step and go into privacy settings, and you can also enable here pause watch history and pause search history. Now, these two settings basically stop the YouTube Kids app from recommending content based on previous content they viewed or searched for, so it will eliminate a lot of kind of random rabbit holes you might get pulled down. Now, there is also a feature for YouTube Kids that will let your kids only watch content that you have approved. But the only way I was able to kind of do this though was to download the YouTube Kids app on a tablet, sign in with yours, the parent's email, and then create a brand new kids profile from within here. And even that said, this is where it broke for me, because even though I tapped to only show approved content, it just gave me an error message, and it ended up creating about 5 new YouTube Kids profiles. But if this does work for you, then according to the documentation, you should be able to go into the settings inside the YouTube Kids app and set the profile to approved content only. Next up, now when I asked on my social media accounts, what apps are your kids using? Discord came up a few times. So Discord is an instant messaging service where you can chat and talk and broadcast to other members who join the same Discord server, which are basically communities built around a particular subject or interest. So Discord, like Snapchat, has a family center with a similar set of capabilities for parents. So to get started, you must install the Discord app and set up an account for both yourself and your child. Then from your child's phone, open up the Family Center from the direct messages page and generate a QR code. You scan that QR code with your phone and send the connection request, accept this request from your child's phone, and then once that's done, you are able to see the following things: the name of new friends your kid has added or accepted, the servers they have joined or communicated with, the names of who they have messaged or called, the time they spent in calls, if they have made any purchases of things like profile customizations, and particular settings that only you can set for them, like who can directly message them and how sensitive content is handled. Now, Discord wants to promote open and honest conversations between you both. So although these features give you an overview of what they're up to, you cannot actually read what is being said. Finally, and a nice touch here, Discord will email you weekly summaries of their activities, so if you don't remember to go in and actively check, you will still get that in your inbox. Spotify next, and this is a relatively quick and easy one. If you have a Spotify family subscription, then if you download Spotify for Kids onto your child's phone or tablets, sign in with your accounts, then it will take you through creating a profile for each of your children to use. And there they can then access curated music that's deemed safe for children to listen to. Now, what that does mean is there is a lot of content that they won't be able to access, even though it is safe, especially things like audiobooks, which I found are significantly limited on that plan. Now I'm gonna add this one in here as well. I know a fair chunk of my audience is based in the UK, and I spent a long time looking around for the best way to get my child a bank account with things like Henry and Starling Bank, but I found Monzo to be very good for 6 to 15-year-olds. It is totally free, you don't pay any monthly fees, you can quickly add or remove money from their accounts, they can get their own brightly coloured cards, they can also save, they even get their own app to see their money and see their bank accounts. Now if you aren't already banking with Monzo, you can set up a bank account in just a few minutes just by downloading the app and following a few instructions. Then tap the plus at the top right here, go to Monzo for under 16s and just follow the steps. Now the only problem we have with Monzo for Kids is that even though I can add my wife as a second adult onto the kids' accounts so she can see what their balance is, she can't add or remove money from their account. So when it comes to paying in pocket money, that's always me. And if my wife ever buys anything for them, then she has to then ask me to take the money out from their accounts. Otherwise, it's great. I think I actually have a link that gets you up to £50 when you sign up, so I'll link that down below if you do want to check that out. Next up, we're going to cover off what you can do to protect your children on some of the most popular games right now. But firstly, a caveat. Now, whilst these games do have some parental controls in them, the platform they play on will also play a very big part. So if you are playing on an Xbox or a PlayStation, for example, both of these platforms have their own parental control systems, which can then also determine who your children can speak to, joining parties with, and just so on. So we'll cover those platforms off first. So if you have an Xbox console, there are a few ways that you can have control and also share digital games installed on the Xbox with other children in your household. Now, by setting the Xbox as your home Xbox, it allows everyone with physical access to that Xbox to play the games on the Xbox without having to be signed into the account which purchased the game. So to get started, download the Xbox Family Settings app on your phone. You'll have to sign in to your own Microsoft account. If you don't already have one, then create one from here. Now, once that's done, you'll have the option to add a child or an organizer. So let's add a child. If they already have an Xbox account, you can add the existing account. But if not, again, you can create one for them here. Use their email address that we set up earlier in this video, give them a password, again, store that in the password manager, and then you can specify their content restrictions age. Everything from 3 years old and upwards here. Decide who they can communicate with, everyone, which I wouldn't recommend, friends only or no one. Decide if they can play online multiplayer, and their account is now set up and ready to manage. Now, there are a lot of options here, starting with social settings. So you can require them to get approval when they try to add new friends, friends or receive new friend requests. Then from message filtering, you can tweak the content filtering of messages, but by default, this will be set to the appropriate filter for their age. Under content restrictions, you can go in game by game and allow or deny things like online multiplayer or just different aspects of games, such as clubs in Minecraft. And then there's spending. Now you can top up their accounts here to give them money to spend for new games or in-game currencies, or you can leave their account without funds and require your approval when they try to purchase something from the Xbox, which will then show up in the family settings app for you to approve or deny. There's also screen time here, which lets you set a schedule for when they're allowed to play games and a limit for how many hours they're allowed to play in that day. Onto PlayStation. So the PlayStation Family app is the place to control spending, playtime, and access to games for households with a PS5 or PS4. Now, like the Xbox, you can make games that are installed on the console available to any accounts in the household by enabling console sharing and offline play in the console settings. Then, in order to manage the parental controls, you'll need to install the PlayStation Family app and then sign in or create your own parental account. Now, once you've done that, you can proceed by tapping the Set Up Your Family app, and this will prompt you to create a child account, and then you can enter their date of birth, enter their email address, and generate a password for them. Again, using the email address, the same one we set up earlier in this video. Next, agree to all of the terms and conditions, and they are now added. So now you're prompted to set up parental controls. Once you've done with that, you can proceed by tapping the Set Up Your Family button. Now you need to decide what restriction level you want to set. So the default is recommended depending on the date of birth that you specified earlier. Whether to accept the default or specify custom, you'll get to review and then set the age levels for games, the ability to communicate with other players and use user-generated content. There's also a spending limit, more on that in just a moment. The ability to use the PS5's web browser and set Blu-ray age restrictions. Back on the Home tab, here you can set up a playtime schedule, which is a set duration and schedule for each day of the week, and an option to decide what happens when time's up. You can either log them out or just hassle them with notifications until they give in. Back home, you have a view of the time played and in which games, and then the spending options. Although the Family app will give you notifications if your kid wants to play a restricted game or wants to use an in-game communication feature, there isn't a request system for purchases. So instead, you have a family wallet, which you can then add funds to and then set a spending limit for the calendar month. Not ideal if you want to control how they spend. Right, onto the actual games now. Roblox is currently the biggest and probably the biggest game in the entire world right now. Grow a Garden or Brain Rots, I think, are the most popular ones right now. But being the world's most popular kids game is also the biggest source by far of a huge amount of negative press. Every other week, news drops that child predators are hanging out inside of Roblox. A recent interview with the Roblox CEO thinks that introducing gambling to Roblox is a brilliant idea, apparently.
Would you ever put a prediction market inside Roblox? Like let kids bet with their Robux?
It sounds very fun and obvious. Like I love that.
Oh, to be clear, I think this is a horrible idea. I was just interested if you were thinking about it.
Well, I actually think it's a brilliant idea.
And even though you can do things, which I'll talk you through right now, there are still ways to break through these restrictions. Now, the biggest problem with Roblox is that the game itself is just a collection of games made by other people, and anybody can make and submit a game onto the Roblox platform. Now, these game developers are then paid by getting children to spend their in-game Robux currency on items in the game.
Perfect.
They can even earn money from putting ads inside of their own games. So even though it is moderated to an extent, it is still very much a wild, wild west. Especially because of the scale of it now, that it's just nearly impossible to moderate in those kind of numbers. So just look, if I go to the parental controls, I'm going to get to this in a moment, and search for the word shower, you can then see the types of games which are available on the platform, and also just see how badly Roblox has miscategorized them. Boys and girls pool roleplay, minimal. Pee Simulator, moderate. One also called Kiss, also minimal. And of all the games that kids play, if you speak to anybody with any knowledge of IT and technology and kids games, Roblox is often the number one thing that many people say they would never, ever let their child on. Keep that in mind. We're all adults here and you are free to make your own decisions, but just kind of setting the stage here. So for Roblox, first thing is first, create yourself an account first. And I actually find this much easier to do from a web browser, so a laptop or a desktop, but you can also do this from the app also if you want to. Now, once that's done, go to your child's Roblox game, and then go to settings, more, settings, parental controls, and then add parents. So here you can enter the email address for your own Roblox accounts, and following the prompts will then link the accounts together. Back in the browser now, and whilst logged in as the parent, go to Settings, Parental Controls, click on the child's name, and if you scroll down to the bottom, here are all of the settings that you can manage, which we're going to go through one by one. So under content restrictions, here you can set the maturity levels, which will then control the types of games they can play inside of Roblox, whilst also making note that they don't always categorize the games properly that I just kind of mentioned. Now you can also go into blocked experiences and search for something. Like I mentioned earlier, searching for shower, for example, brought up some pretty wild examples, and you can block those types of games in here, specifically game by game. Sensitive issues, just make sure that's switched off. It's bad enough already. And back now into communication. Now this is a very, very important one to make sure is switched off based on what I've seen firsthand in Roblox. Under party, connections will allow them to join games with their friends, but still not chat with them. But you might just need to make sure that your children know who they're adding as friends and not just accepting random invites. Under spending restrictions, here you can set limits and also notifications if a lot of money is spent in 1 month. Under visibility, again, you can set this to their friends only or nobody. Trading in inventory, again, I would set this to connections or nobody. And then under blocked users, here is where you can see anyone who has been blocked either by your child or yourself. Now outside of this, I would also recommend just picking up your child's Roblox game from time to time. Just check if they've received any messages. Look at the name of some of the recent games they've joined, just to make sure they haven't found themselves in any inappropriate types of games. And if you need to, block those from the parental control section if needed. Fortnite next. Now this is one of the next biggest games, which do also provide some parental control features. And this also ties together games like Rocket League and Fall Guys as well. Now again, I'm just gonna do this from a web browser as I find it much easier to manage. So sign into your child's Epic Games account. And if they haven't got one already, just head to Epic Games and create one there. Again, use the email address that we set up earlier in this video. And once you're in there, click on their name in the top right, accounts, then parental controls. And here you'll be prompted to set a PIN code if you haven't already. So just set that, and then you can access all of the parental features. So here you can change the PIN you've just set. Require a PIN for purchases only applies, from what I can tell, when purchasing via a PC or web browser, since it states here that these settings don't apply to PlayStation, Steam, Xbox, and Switch. Under Epic Game Store and Fab, here you can control the age limit for in-game purchases like skins and emotes and so on. And I actually had this set as unrated. I didn't realize this setting was here until I looked into researching this video. And so if you have it set to unrated or 18, then they'll be able to see mature content, which Epic's definition of this is non-pornographic sexually explicit content, artistic adult nudity, graphic violence, gore, profanity, drugs, gambling, and alcohol. So you might want to just tone this down, but even with this setting as unrated, I'm yet to personally see anything that concerns me within Fortnite. It seems to be a much safer place so far that I've seen than, say, Roblox. Now underneath that, you can also toggle on or off communication with AI features. Now the only thing I know here was a few months ago, Fortnite had like an AI Darth Vader where people could actually physically talk to him and he would then talk back to you. Now my social feed was just full of people tricking him into saying things for a while, but that's been it as far as I've seen, again, so far.
What if Wendy's did a Darth burger? Would you get that?
Your continued fixation on these absurd burger scenarios tests my patience.
Now up to the top, under social permissions, you can require your PIN to be able to add any friends on Epic Games. Under that, voice chat permissions. Again, this will depend on the platform they are playing on, but this one is well worth setting. Nobody is pretty obvious, nobody. Friends only will let them voice chat with someone who they've added as a friend. Friends and teammates will allow them to chat with anybody who is part of their team inside a particular game, even if they aren't friends. Now this does have some risk, of course, but you might want to use this so your child can play with friends of friends without actually adding them as a friend, if that makes sense. Now likewise, underneath this is text chat permission. So same goes as before, but I've just decided to switch this off completely. Up to the top, to time limits. Here you can set a specific time limit regardless of what console or what platform they're playing on. This is one I didn't actually know about, and now I do, so that is very useful to know as children children move between like Xbox and PlayStation and PC all the time. Time reports will let you send a report of how long they spent playing, and email preferences can be enabled if you want to see which new friends they've added or any parental controls are updated without you knowing. Now, lastly, this one is a little hidden because you can scroll across the top and see Fortnite settings. So here you can control the age rating of games inside of Fortnite, kind of similar to Roblox. People can actually create their own games, so this will then protect them from joining something above their age rating. You can then enable or disable creative mode and editors, which just lets your children actually design their own games inside of the editor. And then if you did have text chat enabled, here is where you can filter out any mature language, which just gets replaced any bad language with heart symbols. Next up, Steam. Now, Steam is the biggest gaming storefront for PC. So if you have a PC, Steam Families is worth setting up. So this allows you to selectively share some games that you have purchased from your account, whilst also controlling things like purchases, friends, chats, and play limit. There are some limits here. You can only have 6 members in a family, and this is because this feature isn't just targeted for child and guardian. It can be used to share titles with your spouse or other members of your household. So there is a limit on the number of members and how often members can leave and join a Steam family. Also, something to note here, that game developers have to add support for Steam Families, so not all games may work with it. However, you can filter by supported games, and of the 80 titles, I checked only 3 older games were unsupported. So to set up, you'll need a Steam account, but you can manage your Steam Family from the mobile, desktop, or Steam website. Once you have your Steam account, head over to your account details and select Family Management. And then you have the option to create a family. Give your family a name. This is only visible to you and other family members. And now you can invite your child's Steam account into that family and select that they are a child. And you can then invite other adults and other children. So all adults can manage the family, and parental controls are only applicable to the child accounts. So once invited, they must accept the request before you can then go and manage their accounts. And then you can then select the child account from your Steam account and manage the games they have access to from your Steam. Now, if you don't have any games, like in this case, as we've only just created the account, they have the ability to request a game, which you can accept from the Request tab. You can then decide if they have access to the Steam store, if they have the ability to access community-generated content like modifications or add-ons to games, if they have an online profile with screenshots and achievements, and if they're allowed access to Steam friends lists for things like text and voice chat. Now, a really useful feature here is playtime limits. So if you only want to let them play on weekends or for certain durations, you can set up a schedule here. And finally, you have more granular options if you decided to allow them access to the store and community content. So, whilst this video is called the definitive guide, please remember that there is no guarantee of anything. There are still plenty of ways to circumvent pretty much anything in this world if you really try hard enough. Much like installing antivirus on your computer, it's not a guarantee that you won't still catch a virus at some point. So check your child's phone or tablet regularly. Obviously, as they get older, this will be less of a thing, but as kids get their first tablet or phone, nothing beats manually checking over things from time to time. So check their messages, what they're watching on YouTube. It's just always better to be safe than sorry. Now, there are also other apps and services available to help monitor and track your family. Bark has an app. They also sell phones with built-in parental controls, which you might want to look into. For families with both Apple and Android devices, apps like Life 360 can be used to track everybody's location, including retracing their steps to see where they have been. And honestly, as a father who regularly sees posts from the local police about young children who have gone missing, that is something that is very, very important to consider. And just don't forget that even though you have set a time limit on their phone, kids are very fast learners. They'll realize that if their hour is up on their iPads, they can probably get another hour on the Xbox or on the Switch. So just keep an eye on that as well. And then if you want to monitor or restrict certain websites and content at home, then speak to your internet service provider to just ask what options they have to add web filtering to your internet connection. And if they are leaving the home with a SIM card, speak to your SIM card provider about enabling parental controls on that. Otherwise, that was the biggest video we have ever made on this channel. It was a huge amount of work involved by the whole team here, the research, production, editing. So I hope you found it informative and not too boring. I hope you were able to follow along step by step. Do please consider subscribing to the channel by clicking the link down below, where you can also find links to all the resources we've mentioned throughout this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.